Hi, in this video we're going to continue our journey through HTML and look at various types of lists, tables, and then we'll look at how to organize the files we're putting together with the use of subfolders. So let's get going with lists and tables. There are a couple of different types of lists that you can do in HTML. One of them is the ordered list. Now, an ordered list in HTML is a series of numbered items. You've made numbered item lists in your word processor, in Microsoft Word or whatever word processor you use. You surround the entire list with the OL and /OL, ordered list tag. Now, inside the OL/OL, you include a number of list items. That's LI for list item, LI and /LI. So the entire table gets OL/OL. Inside it, let's say you had 4 things that you wanted to put in your ordered list, you'd have 4 LI tags. The default numbering, if you don't do anything to change it, is going to be the first one will be 1, the next one will be 2, the next one will be 3. If you want to change it, you put a type equals inside the ordered list tag. So you're going to see OL type equals A, and that gives A, B, C with capital letters. Or if you do OL type equals small a, you get A, B, C, D, E with lowercase letters. If you use a capital I, you get capital Roman numerals. If you use a lowercase I, you get lowercase Roman numerals. Now it looks like PowerPoint automatically uppercased this one. This should be lowercase I, lowercase II, IV, and so on. And if you do OL type equals 1, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you'd never have to put that one in. That's the default if you don't use type equals at all. Now here's an example. Here's a complete HTML file. So I've got my doc type, then HTML, end HTML, head, end head, body, end body. I've got a paragraph that says some programming languages. Then I've created an ordered list. So this is going to be numbered. An ordered list that has a list item for Python, 1 for HTML, 1 for Java. And I get 1 Python, 2 HTML, 3 Java. Here's another one. Let's look at the output first. I get A, B, C, Python, HTML, Java. The only thing I changed in this was instead of just having the tag OL, I have OL type equals lowercase a. Now, I'll bet you guessed what the other type of list was. One type was ordered, the other type is unordered. And unordered lists in HTML are series of bulleted items. So there isn't a concept of 1, 2, 3, but there might be a bullet, like a small filled-in circle. The difference between ordered lists and unordered lists is instead of using the OL tag, you use the UL tag. UL, unordered list. Inside the UL tag, you still use list item, just like you did for ordered lists. The default bullet style, if you do nothing to change it, is a filled circle, which HTML calls a disk. This is your normal standard bullet that you'd see, like these little bullets right here in PowerPoint. To change it, we've got much more complicated syntax. And you know, the people that created HTML, I don't know why they have type equals 1 for ordered lists, something simple like type equals 1 or type equals A. But for unordered lists, if you want to change that disk to something else, you do UL style equals, and then in quotes, list hyphen style hyphen type colon circle semicolon quote. Yes, the hyphens are necessary, the colon is necessary, the semicolon is necessary, the quotes are necessary. You got to type it exactly like this, or it just won't take effect. Circle gives you open bullets. This one should say square, not circle. It gives you square bullets. This one that says none omits the bullets. You get an unordered list where it's just one row after another with no little bullet symbol. And disk gives you the filled bullets, but that's the default. So if you just did UL without a style, you're getting the disks. Let's see what it looks like. Doc type, HTML. Well, you know, this is exactly the same example we looked at before, but I changed the OL and end OL to UL. I changed from ordered list to unordered list. I've still got 3 list items. And look how HTML rendered it. Bullet, bullet, bullet for each of my list items. And if I change it, the only thing I changed here was I made style equals list type circle, and I got open circles instead of filled in circles. I could make them squares. I could make it none. You can nest lists. You can have a list within a list. Now, before we look at the HTML, let's look at what the output is. I've got a paragraph of text, programming languages. Then I've got a bulleted list. That's an unordered list that says 3GL and 4GL. Remember that from a couple of units ago? 3rd generation languages, 4th generation languages. And within that, I've got a numbered list, or as HTML calls them, an ordered list. So I've got Python and Java as an ordered list inside the first unordered list item. And HTML and SQL are an ordered list right after the second list item. Let's see how I do that in the HTML. I've got the paragraph for programming languages. Then I've got an unordered list. That goes from here, UL, all the way down here, /UL. Inside it, I've got my first list item. My list item is 3GL. Then I have an ordered list with 2 list items. I end that ordered list, do my next list item. Notice this list item is not inside the ordered list because I've already closed the ordered list tag. It's inside the unordered list. So this one, 4GL, is part of my unordered, my bulleted list. And I close that list item and then put in another ordered list with HTML and SQL in. You can nest these as deep as you want, whatever makes sense for your web page. Now let's talk of another way that you can organize material. Tables are fairly useful. You can create tables in HTML to format your data in a grid-like pattern of rows and columns. So a table, just like a table would be in your word processor, is going to consist of rows and columns. You use the table and end table tag to surround the entire table. If you want, you can put a caption for your table with the caption end caption tag. This will give it a title up above the rows and columns. It's optional. You don't have to do it. Then each row of the table is surrounded by the table row, or TR tag. So if you have a table and you want it to have 4 rows, you'll have 4 TR/TR tags. Within each one, you put each data item with TD for table data. So let's say you have something that's got 3 rows and 4 columns. You'll have 3 TR/TR tags. Inside each one of those, you'll have 4 TD/TD tags. Each data item goes into a separate column. If you want to make one of these a header row, use TH, table header, instead of TR, table row. You do it the same way. THs and TRs are done the same way. You have as many of them, or you have within them as many table data items as you've got columns. What's the difference between a header and a row? Not much. They function the same way. They each eat up cells in your table. But your browser automatically formats anything in your header row to be bold-faced and centered. And you don't have to have a header if you want. And you know what? They don't really advertise it. You could make every row a header, and HTML doesn't care. Just everything in it will be bold-faced and centered. So here's an example. Notice I'm getting a little bit longer in the example. I'm putting together a table that's got 1, 2, 3 rows and 3 columns. So my first row is kitty, cute, mammal, chickie, fluffy, bird, tree frog, scary, amphibian. You notice how this column is lined up, this column is lined up, this column is lined up. How did I do that? Table, end table. Within that, I've got 3 rows. Table row, end table row, table row, end table row, table row, end table row. Inside each table row, I've got 3 data items. Table data kitty, table data cute, table data mammal, and so on. Okay, this is a table. This is the way a table looks in HTML. Here's another example. This time I've put a caption in. Notice it comes inside the table. My caption is animals, and it puts this right above the table. This caption is not inside a table row. It's inside the table, but before I put any table rows. Now I've got a table row. Now it looks like 4 of them. One that says animal, comment, family, and then the line about kitties, line about chickies, and line about tree frogs I had before. So I've got a table row. Instead of table data items, I called these ones headers. Animal is centered in this column. Comment is centered in this column. Family is centered in this column, and they're boldface. And then I've got the table row with the table data elements exactly like I did on the previous example. Now, sometimes you want your table not just to line up, but to have borders drawn around it, so it's real obvious that you've got a grid there. To put a border around the entire table and a border around each data item or header item in the table, we're going to put some style information in the head portion of our HTML. Okay, this is called using cascading style sheets, or CSS. And often you'll see, if you search for, you go and Google HTML tables, you're going to get hits back about HTML and CSS. What they're talking about in CSS is ways to apply style to HTML elements. And we're getting one lesson ahead here on using CSS, but it's so useful to be able to put borders on tables. And I don't know another way to do this. So let's just get an example of how to do these borders so that our tables won't look so ugly. And then we'll catch up in our next video with more about cascading style sheets. So, you willing to take me on faith on this? That it's something worth doing? Let's go for it. We add a style and an end style tag within the head section of our HTML. Remember, our HTML has a head and a body. We haven't put much in the head. All we've put in the head so far is a title. Now we're going to add a section on style. Within the style tag, we want to type this in exactly as is. Now, I'll explain what it means, but for now, just assume that you're going to copy and paste something like this. Within the style section, this says, any tag in your HTML for this page that's a table tag, or a table header tag, or a table data tag, apply all of the style information that goes from this opening brace to this closing brace. And I've got 3 style commands here. One is a border command, one is a border collapse command, and one is a padding command. What do? The border says, put a border that's 1 pixel wide. You could make this 2 pixels or 5 pixels or 12 pixels if you wanted real fat lines. Make it a solid line and make it the color black. You could change this word black to red or green or blue or something like that if you wanted. Border collapse, we're going to see what happens if you put this in and if you don't. It's up to you which style of drawing borders you like. You'll understand it better when we see an example. And padding says around every element, either a table, table heading, or table data, put 5 pixels of white space around everything. So there's a little bit of room between the first column and the second column, between the top of the row and the bottom of the row. So let's see this in use. Here I've got in my heading, so from head to end head. I've got my title, like I've been doing on every web page. Now I've got my style section, and I just put this in exactly as we had it on the previous page. And then the body part, I just didn't copy all that HTML here. It's exactly the same as we had before, with table headers, a caption, 3 rows after the table headers. So the data is exactly the same. What happened here? I've drawn a border around the entire table, around every one of the table data elements, and there's 5 pixels of white space to the left of Kitty, on top of Kitty, below Kitty, and to the right of Kitty. Now it looks like more than 5 pixels to the right of Kitty, but take a look at Tree Frog. HTML figured out how wide this column was by whatever the longest entry was. Tree Frog is the longest here, Fluffy is the longest, or excuse me, Comment is the longest here, Amphibian is the longest here. So I've got 5 pixels around each of them. This table looks a little bit nicer, doesn't it? Now this is what happens if we leave out that border collapse line. It will draw a border around the table. That's this outside one. Notice there's 5 pixels of padding, top, bottom, left, and right on the table. Each table data element has its own border drawn with 5 pixels around it. But I can see each of those boxes separately. This might be what you want. But if what you'd rather have is what we have on the previous page, let me go back there. Let's see, here's the previous page. We put border collapse, collapse. It says wherever you've got 2 borders right up against each other, let's just draw it on the farthest outside part. If I leave this line out altogether, then I get this one. Your choice as to what you want. Now, how about if I have data that I want to have cross more than one column? Whether it's a table data element or a table heading element, if I add a column span attribute to either the table header or table data tag, if I put col span equals 2, whatever I've got from here until the /th will fill up 2 columns. And whatever I have in this data element will fill up 3 columns. Normally, each header or data uses up 1 column. This one says, I'm only giving you 1 set of text, but make it cross 2 columns. Make it cross 3 columns. Let's see an example. So, now I've got animal, comment, and family. I made this one span 2 columns. I made the fluffy bird span 2 columns, and I made tree frog span all 3 columns. I left the borders uncollapsed so you can see exactly what's going on here. So how did I do that? On the table header for comment and family, I said column span equals 2. On the table data item for fluffy bird, I said column span equals 2. For the table data item for the tree frog, I said column span equals 3. So it says, okay, I've got 3 columns going. I'm going to fill them all up with just this 1 set of text. Now, your data doesn't just have to be text. Maybe you wanted to have the name of an animal and a picture of the animal. Aw, a kitty, a chickie, a tree frog, a panda. Well, we know how to display pictures, and in fact, you did it on your last assignment. We do that with the image tag. I can put the image tag inside a data item. So, what's going on here? I've got my table headers, kitty, chickie, tree frog, panda. And I've got a row that has 4 data elements. For this data element, from table data to end table data, I have an image tag. And here I've got an image tag. And here I've got an image tag. And here I've got an image tag. Now, I didn't reproduce the entire page of HTML code. I just started with the table. There is all the stuff before this, your doc type, your HTML tag, the header, the style to get the borders drawn. This is just the table portion. Now, notice something else here. I said source equals, and then I put images/kitty.jpg, images/chickie.jpg. We're going to talk about this in a little bit when we talk about subfolders. I happen to have a folder that's got my HTML in it. The HTML, it's this big long folder, you can't even see all of it, that's got this HTML that I'm actually displaying on this web browser. Inside that folder, I have a subfolder called images, and I've copied a whole bunch of graphics in there. Here's 4 of the JPEGs that I've put in there. And then I can use them without having to put a big long path name. Just from wherever I am, go to the images subfolder, find kitty.jpg. So notice how I made them all have the same height. So these pictures look a little bit nicer. They're lined up a little bit better than just using the image tag on its own. Now let's talk about those folders on a website. When you run your HTML, the browser knows what folder the HTML code is stored in. It had to find it in order to be able to run it. So wherever it found it, that's its home directory for that web page. When you link to another page, and you might be doing that with the, remember the A tag that gives us a hyperlink? When you link to another page, or if you pull in an image with the source equals on the image tag, you have a choice of using an absolute path name. The absolute path name would be find it at this exact location on this computer. Or you can do it with a relative path name. Relative path name means relative to my home directory where you're running the HTML that you're looking at right now. So here's some examples of an absolute path name. Now I've done this as if I were on a Windows machine because I use the window more often than the Mac. I've got a href equals c user Steve hobby page2.html. Let's say I wanted to link from one page of my hobby project to page 2. I'd have this tag. And it says, look on my hard drive, which is letter C, in the users directory, the Steve folder, the hobby subfolder, and look for this file. Now, on a Mac, you probably don't have C:, and you're going to use front slashes instead of backslashes. You might have user, your name, your folder, and so on. You could do the same sort of thing with the image. I could have put, look in C user Steve hobby images kitty.jpg. But suppose you wanted to run your website, not just you running it on your computer. Suppose you really wanted to post it to a web server somewhere so that everybody could go to yourname.com and see what was there. That web server is going to have a folder that you don't know the name of. It's got a folder that it's got its websites in. So if ever you're going to run your website on a server instead of off your own hard drive, would that web server have a C users Steve? Probably not. Or, here's a nice hypothetical situation. Suppose you were submitting your code to Mr. I to be graded. If you put things in like this, it assumes that I can get to files on your computer. You know what? I can't. But if you send me the files that I need, I can get to them relative to wherever I download them. So how are we going to do this? We use relative path names. The solution is use a relative path name. That means you don't start with the C:/ on Windows or with the first front slash on a Mac. Instead, you just use the file name if the file's included in the same folder as the code being executed, or just the name of the subfolder. So here's a relative path name. A href equals page2.html. Wherever the HTML is that I'm running right now, there's another file called page2.html. Go find it, link to it. Whatever directory I'm in here for the image, whatever folder I'm in, I've got a subfolder called images. Inside there, there's a file called kitty.jpg. Got it? Now, one other thing that I want you to know, there's a special name that websites use called index.html. So far, you've named your HTML pages anything you want, and that's no problem, as long as you ended it in .html. So you might have had one like, assignment 4a.html, or assignment 4b.html, or maybe you called it my first.html, or maybe you called it hobby.html. Doesn't matter. You were able to run it by putting that file name in. That isn't the way we tend to run things. If you wanted to go to Amazon.com, you don't go to Amazon.com/toppage.html. There's one special name that web browsers look for if you leave the file name off and just give it the name of the web server or the directory, and that is index.html. If you have a file called index.html, then that's what gets displayed when you put in the network name for that URL. Without you typing index.html, it goes there. Doesn't make so much difference to us the way we're running, because we're always running everything just off our own machine. We don't have access to a web server that is going to host all of our stuff and make it available to everybody on the internet. But I'd like you to get into the habit of creating your top-level page and calling it index.html. So, how are you going to be submitting websites for your future assignments? On your machine, use whatever folder you want to hold your web pages. Name it whatever you want. Go crazy. Call the top-level page, the first page of your website, call it index.html. Put any other web pages in the same folder with whatever names you want, as long as they end in .html. Create a subfolder called images that contain any of the picture files you're referencing, like JPEG or GIF or bitmap or PNG files. So, for example, if I had a folder on my PC on the C drive called GOA assign 5C for assignment 5C, or maybe on my Mac, if I had something, notice the front slash is there, GOA assign 5C. If that was the name of a folder, that's great. Make your folders whatever's meaningful for you. Here's the files that would be in it. Maybe index.html. Maybe I've got two other web pages in my website. I'd call them page 2.html and page 3.html. Then I'd have a subfolder called images, and I'm going to put my JPEG files in there. Now, what are you going to do with all of this? Everything that I've got outlined in red, you're going to compress into a zip file. Have you ever done that before? Have you ever created a zip file? You can do it on both the Windows or the Mac machines. The way you do it is slightly different, and on the GOA website, right below this video, I've linked you to a YouTube video telling you how to create a zip file on Windows, and one showing you how to create a zip file on the Mac. You're going to zip for me everything in this folder. So all of your web pages, the images subfolder, and your images. You'll turn this into one file that's going to end in .zip for zip, and that one file is what you're going to submit to me. Then when I download it, I recreate the structure that you had, and your website works. Got it? Okay. So what is your assignment? Start with the web page you built for assignment 5B. You're going to modify it so that you've got more than one page in your website. You're now making your website a little bit more realistic. We tend not to just have one page at a time when we go somewhere. You go to Amazon.com and you click on something and it takes you somewhere else. So you need to have more than one page. The top one you're going to call index.html. I want you to have more than one image and store the images in a subfolder. You now need to modify what you did last time to put in at least one table. This can be a table of new information. You can have a table of images like I had before. Whatever you want that makes sense for your website. Put in at least one ordered list and one unordered list somewhere. Zip it all up. Submit the entire website to me. Go to it. If you have any questions, please contact me. Put a question in the discussion database, send me an email, send me a message on Skype, arrange for a time that we can Skype with each other. I'm happy to help.